Top 5 Recent American Serial Killers.
Number 5. Sean Michael Great, 2006 to 2016. Sean Michael Great was born in Ohio in 1976. Great was said to have had a normal childhood until the age of 11, when after his parents divorced, his mother abandoned him and his siblings to go live with a man in Kentucky. This affected Great negatively, and he is said to have started harboring dark and murderous fantasies about his mother. In 2006, Great killed a young mother of two who was only identified as Dana Nicole Lowry 13 years later when Great admitted to murdering her after his arrest. He then strangled a woman named Rebecca Lacey to death after she, according to him, stole $4 from him. Her remains were only discovered in 2015, and until Great's confession, her death had been ruled as a drug overdose. The body of Elizabeth Griffith was found a month after Great was arrested, and her autopsy revealed that Great had strangled her to death. On the 13th of September 2016, an unnamed woman called 911 to report that she had been kidnapped and was being held hostage and sexually assaulted by Great. She had managed to make that call whilst Great was asleep, before he had had a chance to murder her. Her call led to Great's arrest. Upon his arrest, the remains of Stacy Hicks were found in the house that he lived in. Stacy was strangled to death. On the same day he was arrested, Great also led police to the remains of his ex-girlfriend, Candace Cunningham, also murdered. Great attributed his motives to government assistance, writing, "They were already dead, just their bodies were flopping wherever it can flop, but their minds were already dead. The state took their minds." Once they started receiving their monthly checks, Great was sentenced to death and is scheduled to be executed on 19 March 2025. Number 4. Rocky Ali Bohman, 2005 to 2017. Rocky Ali Bohman was born in December of 1977. On February 6, 2005, Rocky Bohman and his girlfriend, Karen Wilkins, murdered mother Debbie Lacey. Bohman hit Lacey, tied her hands behind her back, and held her in water until she drowned. They then took her car and traded it in for cocaine. To avoid the death sentence, Bohman pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Whilst in prison, Bohman realized his apprehension for criminals who hurt children. Thus, 7 years later, on the 5th of July 2012, Bohman choked fellow inmate, 44-year-old Brian Hunsaker, in the prison showers and stabbed him over 80 times with a shank until he died. Hunsaker was serving 6 life terms for sexually assaulting a 10-year-old girl in 2001 and for molesting a 5-year-old girl in 1992. Then 5 years later, on the 22nd of January 2017, Bohman strangled and slit the throat of another inmate, 27-year-old Nicholas Anderson. Anderson was in jail serving a 20-year sentence for child molestation. It seemed that Bohman wanted the death penalty. In a letter addressed to a judge, he wrote that killing sex offenders was the best feeling I've had in a long time, and if you don't send me to death row, I vow to dedicate my next killing to you. In November of 2019, Bohman got what he wanted and was sentenced to death. However, whilst on death row awaiting execution, he died by suicide on the 10th of June 2020 in a Florida prison. Number 3. Retta Phyllis Mays, 2017 to 2018. Retta Phyllis Mays was born in 1975 in Reynoldsville in West Virginia. She was a United States Army veteran, but at the time of the murders, she worked as a nursing assistant at the Louis A. Johnson Veterans Medical Center in Clarksburg, West Virginia. In 2017, Mays was assigned to work overnight shifts, and simultaneously, elderly patients began suffering mysterious acute drops in blood sugar levels and dying. Because of this, the hospital began an internal investigation of 11 deaths. The investigation was turned over to the FBI and Mays was fired from the hospital, whilst the 2-year-long investigation took place. It was discovered that Mays enjoyed researching female serial killers and watching Netflix series such as Nurses Who Kill. Ultimately, investigators found that during her time at the medical center, Mays would inject elderly patients with insulin so as to cause acute drops in their blood sugar levels and their eventual deaths. She did this in order to end their suffering and enable them to pass away gently. And she also noted that because of her tumultuous personal life, these murders gave her a sense of control. Even though there were up to 20 suspicious deaths in the time Mays was working, she was only charged with 7 second-degree murders and 1 count of intent to commit murder due to insufficient evidence for the other deaths. On 11 May 2021, Mays received 7 consecutive life sentences plus 20 years. She was also ordered to pay the victims' families $172,624.96. Her known victims, all veterans, were 84-year-old Archie Edgell, 82-year-old Robert Edge, 89-year-old Robert Colzo, 81-year-old George Shaw Sr., 96-year-old William Halloway, 82-year-old Felix McDermott, 88-year-old Raymond Golden, and 92-year-old Russell R. Posey. Number 2. Ramon Alberto Escobar, 2018. Although originally from El Salvador, Ramon Alberto Escobar committed his crimes in Texas and California in 2018. Born in 1971 and having grown up in poverty, Escobar entered America in the 1980s, and between then and 2017, he committed and was charged for crimes such as burglary, assault, and trespassing, and was deported by ICE over 6 times. However, in 2017, Escobar applied for political asylum and became a permanent resident of America. After one of his arrests in 2000, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Despite his criminal behavior, Escobar was not known to be violent and was someone whose community spoke warmly about. However, on the 26th of August 2018 in Texas, during an argument with his 65-year-old uncle, Rogelio, in which his uncle belittled him, Escobar bludgeoned him to death with a baton. His 60-year-old aunt, Dina, soon became suspicious of her brother's disappearance, and so 2 days later, Escobar strangled her to death to avoid being caught out. However, Escobar was detained and questioned by the police 2 days later, but having no evidence against him, they let him go. Escobar then fled to Los Angeles, where he became homeless. On 8 September 2018, Escobar attacked and killed 51-year-old Juan Ramirez, a fellow homeless man who fell into a 3-year-long coma before passing away in 2021. From there, Escobar attacked and killed other homeless men, 24-year-old Braden Rideout and 59-year-old Kelvin Williams, with a baseball bat. On the 20th, he attacked and killed 39-year-old Stephen Ray Cruz Jr., who actually lived with his parents and was just out fishing. His final victim on 24 September 2018 was 63-year-old Jorge Martinez, who he again beat with a baseball bat, causing him to slip into a coma from which he would pass away. Escobar was caught by the police soon after this and ultimately charged with 6 counts of murder, including his aunt and uncle in Texas, 5 counts of attempted murder, and 4 counts of robbery. Escobar's motive for the murders were personal animosity and financial hardship. Escobar was found fit to stand trial, and after accepting a plea deal to avoid the death penalty, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on May 6, 2022. Number 1. Kenyel William Brown, 2019 to 2020. Kenyel William Brown was a 40-year-old man from River Rough, Michigan. As a teenager and into his adulthood, he began doing drugs and was in and out of prison for crimes such as attack with a weapon, selling drugs, illegal possession of a taser, multiple parole violations, and for a hit and run in which someone died. However, regardless of the severity of his crimes, he was always released from prison ahead of the completion of his sentence because he was also employed as an FBI informant since the late 90s. On 7 December 2019, Brown shot dead 31-year-old Lauren Harrington. 2 months later, he shot and killed 52-year-old Kimberly Green and 48-year-old Dorian Patterson. After he became suspected of these 3 murders, his status as an FBI and police informant was revoked. Whilst an arrest warrant was out for Brown, he shot and killed 49-year-old Garcias Woodyard and 41-year-old Amir Thaxton, who was also a friend of his. His last known victim on the 22nd of February was 36-year-old Eugene Jennings. All his murders were believed to be robbery, money, or drug-related and took place over the period of 3 months in 3 cities in Wayne County, Michigan. Brown was never charged for the murder of these 6 victims because on the 24th of February 2020, whilst police were trying to arrest him, he shot himself in the head and died 4 days later in the hospital.